When a team comes into town and does what you do better than you in every aspect of the game, you lose that game. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Monday, November the 28th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. I am joined, as always, by a very happy Victory Monday version of producer JT. It's only a Victory Monday for him because he, of course, is our resident Bengals fan. For all of you Titans listeners, unfortunately, first non-Victory Monday in a while for the Titans. But JT, you got to be feeling good. How was your weekend? You were at the game, as was I. You were rooting for your hometown Bengals, and they got the win. How do you feel?
I feel very good about this week. Coming into it, I was a little concerned. I was like, this game could have gone either way. I think most people know that this game could have gone anyway, but it was a good weekend for me. Ended up being really good. I'm the only one celebrating a Victory Monday, and to all of you saying the hypocrisy is high, I revel in it. I excel in it, being on this Titans podcast as a Bengal. So bring it on.
You were born in the darkness.
I was born in the darkness. But yes, my family came down. We all went to the game. They're all from Cincinnati. So we had a good weekend here in Nashville. They came down and celebrated with us. So
that's so fun. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that somebody had a good time at the Titans game because, of course, Titans fans did not. We spent all week last week rolling our eyes as the Titans told us that this was not, in fact, a revenge game for them. We even titled our preview episode, "Definitely Not a Revenge Game." And I guess the sarcasm rings hollow. We should have, I guess, believed them because based on the way that they played, they sure didn't play like it was a revenge game. It seemed like they didn't want it nearly as bad as the Bengals did. And that was kind of the story of the game. A very strange game for the Titans. Anybody that's watched the Titans any amount this season or in seasons previous knows that this was maybe the most out of character game for the Titans in a couple of different aspects that we're going to get into this week. But on this Monday episode, of course, it's our winners and losers episode of the show. And I've got plenty of both from my winners and losers article written after the game yesterday. It's already up at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. If you'd like to read that, it's winners and losers from the Titans 16-20 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. So go and check that out. But we're going to be going through the whole article here, and I'll be giving some more context to these thoughts and takes and statistics than I do in the article. We're going to dive into everything from a 10,000-foot perspective. First of all, this is Tennessee's third consecutive loss to Cincinnati's, the Joe Burrow Cincinnati Bengals, that is, and the second straight loss to the Bengals in Nissan Stadium. I shouldn't have to remind any Titans fans about the one that came before this. The good news for the Titans, which there's a couple of things, it is a winners and losers article, so there are some winners in here. And I think that there are more positives maybe to take from this game than most Titans fans are pointing to on this this overreaction Monday. JT, I tweeted out earlier today that it is always entertaining for me to watch the Titans go on a 7 out of 8 win streak tear, winning 7 games in 2 months, and then lose one game on a particularly bad day at the office to a very good football team in a very close game. And suddenly all of the defeatist, absurd fanatics come out of the woodwork and the sky is falling. The sky is not falling for this Titans team. I saw some people in my mentions on Twitter talking before the game about whether or not this was a must-win game. It wasn't a must-win game for them. The Titans are in a pretty unique situation in the NFL where they have their division all but locked up. They're going to host a home playoff game, and the must-win games for them for the rest of the year, I guess you could argue it's the Jacksonville games later in the year because those are division games. You still got one Houston game coming up. Other than that, they don't have a ton of must-win games. At this point, they're really just playing for seeding in the playoffs, which matters, but based on last year's outcome, they got the number 1 overall seed and lost in their first game at home when they should have been hosting the AFC Championship game the following week if they had played their style of football. I think Titans fans can appreciate the fact that really all that matters is just getting into the playoffs, and it is important to host a playoff game if you can, but beyond that, it's anybody's ball game when you get to the postseason in the NFL, and that's the luxurious position the Titans are in right now. They still hold a comfortable lead in the AFC South. Their 7-4 record is far from panic worthy. The bad news, I guess, from a all-encompassing standpoint, is that this wasn't just a tough loss for them. It was a pretty ugly one. It was a bizarre Tennessee performance that was almost completely the opposite of what we've come to appreciate about them and what their identity has been all season long and in seasons prior to this. So we've got plenty to unpack in this tough game. And there's a tough game against the Eagles coming up on the horizon next Sunday. They've got a lot to fix and adjust this week. But I guess if you're looking for the optimistic standpoint, you could say this is a game that, it's advantageous to the Titans to be coming in with a reality check from Sunday and with a chip on their shoulder in a game that they would really like to win. And I think is a game that, and we'll preview a lot more of this on our Friday show, of course. I think this Eagles game is a very winnable game for them and a gettable game for them. I don't think the Eagles are a juggernaut by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll talk more about that on Friday. First, let's look back at this game. Let's talk about some winners and losers.
Yeah, let's get into this winners and losers article segment on this show here. We're going to start with the first three, of course, do a little bit of Titans news and then get some more in here. But with our first loser of the day comes on something that both of these teams were very good at coming into this game, and that is red zone touchdown percentage. The Bengals ranked first in that category with 75%, and the Titans were a close second with 74.1%. But, of course, we were talking about a loser here, and it does go to the Titans with some massive regression in that category this week.
Absolutely. The Titans were coming into this game at nearly 75% in the red zone, getting a touchdown, that is, on the season. That number's bound to come down after a 0% performance on Sunday. They go 0 for 4 on their red zone trips against the Bengals. They failed to reach the end zone on any of their 4 trips. And listen, as a member of the media covering this team, I feel like whenever there's a loss, it's our job, JT, to diagnose what exactly went wrong. People want to find where they can reasonably point their fingers in a loss, what you can attribute the loss to. Sometimes it's a lot of little things that kind of pile up and it's just an overall bad day. There's no one or two culprits. It's kind of a group effort. And sometimes you get games like in the playoff loss last year when you could point to Ryan Tannehill and Todd Downing and say, that's pretty much the reason they lost this game. 2 guys had a really, really bad outing. And you can say, yep, that's pretty much it. It boils down to these one or two things. In this game, that was the case. In my opinion, there were 2 things that sealed the deal for this team, and there were other things that could have gone their way. They could have gotten some bounces, like at the end of the game, which we'll talk about towards the end of the show on special teams. They could have gotten some bounces in other areas, but ultimately, these 2 things were the reason that they lost this game. The first of which was they were the less physical team. And they can't win. This Titans team cannot win when they're the less physical team. And I'll tell you why in a little bit when we talk about that. The other reason is they went 0 for 4 in the red zone. JT, it's a Monday, and so there's Monday Night Football tonight. If I told you that it wasn't actually the Colts and the Steelers playing, it was 2 other teams, and I didn't tell you who was who. And I said, I'm not going to tell you anything about these 2 teams, what their records are, where they're playing, or how they do in the game, outside of the fact that I'll tell you Team A went 0 for 4 in the they're going to go 0 for 4 in the red zone. I need you to pick which team you think is going to win and put some money down. You'd feel pretty confident that Team B is winning that game. It's really that simple in the NFL, boys and girls. When you get into the red zone 4 times and can't get a touchdown on any 4 of those trips, you're losing 9 out of 10 of those games. That's just how it works. And sometimes, we talk about this Titans team on the show. We've talked for a couple of weeks now about how this Titans team under Mike Vrabel has defied the odds in what is supposed to be a regressing statistic. Red zone efficiency, the nerds will tell you, and they're typically right about this, that red zone efficiency is a luck-based statistic. It's a flip of the coin. You can be better or worse than the average at any given point, but you're always going to regress back to the mean. It's not something year to year or week to week that's necessarily predictive, like turnovers, for example. Well, with this Titans team, they've been the one exception to that rule for the past 2 or 3 or 4 seasons in a row. They have been at the very top of the league in their red zone efficiency. When they get into scoring position, they get home. Now, a big reason for that is because with other NFL teams that are passing based, When you get into the red zone, JT, the defense has so much less ground to cover. In the lower red zone, the field shrinks and it becomes a lot more difficult to get into the end zone. That's the nature of the sport. With the Titans, the reason they're so successful historically in the red zone is because their running game has been so dominant on any given Sunday that they can get what they want, and King Henry has been able to punch it in and or be the decoy that the passing game needs, a capable, advantageous, opportunistic rather passing game for the Titans has been able to take advantage of those things, and that's why they've been so good. Well, on Sunday, they were like the rest of the pack. They did not have that running game that they could lean on. Again, we'll talk about that later on with another loser. We'll talk about the Titans on the ground, which is a big loser in this game and is the other big reason that they lost the game. But because they didn't have that edge in the red zone, they went 0 for 4, and they weren't able to capitalize on what has been a key ingredient for them all season long, rarely wasting opportunities to score when they managed to move into scoring position. The only touchdown they scored all game was on that bizarro world screen pass Derrick Henry run that almost went 60 or 70 or 80 yards. He gets a rare strip fumble rather inside the 5 from a trailing defender, and Treylon Burks with a nice hustle play gets there and recovers it in the end zone for a touchdown. Outside of that, every single red zone attempt by them failed. And I was guest hosting a football show with Braden Gall, filling in for our friend Zach Lyons, host of Football and Other F Words, earlier today. So go check that out, by the way. We talked about some other things and some SEC football, a lot of interesting topics on there that we discussed. But we were talking about this, and Braden asked me, well, what went wrong in the red zone? What can we point a finger at? And my answer to that is there is no one thing. There is no one reason that the Titans didn't have success in the red zone yesterday. It was a kind of cornucopia of reasons. And this is off the top of my head. After I'm finished recording for the day, I want to go back and look at the drive summaries. But off the top of my head, you had one that was killed by penalties. And that's going to happen when you're an undisciplined team. You're not going to be able to succeed in the red zone. Those penalties kill you. Holding calls, illegal men downfield, that kind of thing is killer for teams in the red zone. And both teams had a tough day with penalties all day long. Another was killed by Todd Downing in what was the worst play call of the day for my money. It was, you've seen probably this picture going around on Twitter of Jeff Swaim desperately trying with his incredibly athletic vertical to catch that in-breaking route with Treylon Burks blocking for him downfield. The person who tweeted that, who I don't have that pulled up right at this moment, so I can't give you credit, unfortunately, but it's kind of going viral, and he says, I can't help but wonder why this isn't reversed. I feel like this should be reversed. It should be Jeff Swaim blocking for a Treylon Burks, looking to get some yards after the catch on an in-breaking route, which I believe was on a third down in the red zone on the south side of the stadium. That was one of the drives that got killed, and that was one of the things that you could point to Todd Downing, who had a typically poor day, in my opinion. It kind of is par for the course for him. He had some head-scratching play calls. That's one you can't have, and you can't have it kill a red zone drive, and it did. Another was killed by not a bad read by Tannehill. He had Robert Woods wide open in the end zone for a touchdown, but he went to Chigakonkwo coming across the middle, and you can't get mad at him for that because we've been begging him to target Chig more, and he did in this game. It was just a bad pass. He threw it 100 miles an hour and over his head, and it was just not a good pass, one of the worst passes of his day. Those are 3 of the 4. The fourth I got to go find, but there were, needless to say, a number of reasons things went wrong. We asked Ryan Tannehill in his post-game press conference about their red zone inefficiency. And JT, if you wouldn't mind playing that video, this is what he had to say.
Finishing drives could help, just being able to get in the end zone when we're down there. And we had some opportunities where we stubbed our toe a little bit and stopped drives that had chances to keep going. So just overall, like I keep saying, I sound like a broken record, but just got to be cleaner and make more plays consistently throughout the game.
And does that same concept apply to the 0 for 3 in the red zone today? That's unusual to you guys.
Yeah, like I said, it's unusual. We put a lot of focus and attention and practice down in the red zone, pride ourselves on being good down there. And today we didn't execute well.
What was it feeling like?
So based on what my buddy Teron Davenport said in that video, actually it may have been 0-3, and I may not be forgetting a red zone trip. Maybe I had the number wrong. Maybe they went 0 for 3. The point is they had 3 or 4 red zone trips. They didn't convert on any of them. And that was one of the two key ways in which Sunday's performance was wildly out of character for this Mike Vrabel team. You have to give your flowers to the Bengals, who I don't think Zach Taylor's a very good coach, but I think they have a very good roster. We know they have a very good roster, and they're a contender in the AFC. They came in with a very good game plan that I don't think is unique to any Titans opponent, but they executed it as well as anybody else has this year. And they made the Titans play a certain type of football that they don't want to play. And it ended up being just enough for the Bengals to get the victory. So credit to them. They were the better team for sure. However, I feel like the Titans certainly, it wasn't a game, JT, in which you felt like the Titans gave it their all and they just came up short because they just got outclassed. It was far from the Titans' best performance. And I think if they had given their best, if they'd given the performance perhaps that they gave in Green Bay, they might have come out on the other end of this game. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And so, at the end of the day, you can't expect to win in the NFL when you go over in the red zone in a game. And this game was no exception.
Yeah, no, I agree, especially with what was kind of what you were seeing on the field. We'll get into this later, of course. But if you are a stout defense that is letting guys like Samaj P. Ryan, of all people, kind of run all over you, it's gonna be really tough to come out on top. Anyways, let's move on to a winner here, and maybe the only guy on offense who really deserves a winning title today is Treylon Burks.
No, I agree. Congrats to Treylon Burks I said this in the article, for being the only true winner in this article that felt fully deserved. Burks's breakout continued where it left off, essentially, in Green Bay last Thursday night. I think the Titans have to feel pretty good about this element of their team. Treylon Burks is, in fact, him. He's that dude. He ended up in this game tying the team high in targets with 6, as well as tying the team high in receptions with 4. He got 70 total yards, including his play of the game, which was a fantastic 51-yard play-action bomb from Ryan Tannehill that actually was a hair short, that he had to come back and make a fantastic contested catch, leaping over his defender. It felt like, to me, in the moment, from a narrative standpoint, his "I've arrived" moment as a rookie in front of his home crowd. That was kind of the moment where Titans fans, and I think coaches and teammates alike, looked at that and said, you know what, we might just be all right having moved on from A.J. Brown. And that's my main takeaway. I tweeted this out last night, that the Titans have to, in this specific department, feel a lot better now than they did a couple of weeks ago, even, about the A.J. Brown situation. John Robinson took that gamble for reasons that were somewhat beyond his control. And we've discussed this on the show. It's not entirely John Robinson or Mike Vrabel or the Titans' fault that A.J. Brown's not here. He didn't want to be here. However, John Robinson did make the trade. He didn't have to make it. And it was a gamble. And it's maybe finally starting to look like it may turn out to be what he needed it to be in order to be a successful trade. And that is basically a carbon copy of what the Vikings and the Bills did with Stephon Diggs, trading him away from Minnesota to the Bills and getting that first round pick in return and using it to draft a little guy named Justin Jefferson, who is tearing the league up right now and is maybe the best receiver in the entire league. Treylon Burks, he looked like A.J. Brown looked oftentimes for the Titans yesterday in that game. And if he can continue to improve and excel in that way as a big contested catch physical receiver, then, they may have made the right choice moving on from A.J. Brown, saving all of that money and getting a guy that can fill in that role for the team. Tannehill, for his part, demonstrated increased trust in Burks in this game. They threw to him in contested situations and tight windows all day. There were a couple of passes, and I'm looking now, he was targeted 6 times and caught 4 of them. I can think of 2, so I guess the only other 2 that he had that he ended up dropping that he could have made a play on and just didn't. I think that as he continues to improve as an NFL receiver, you'll see him make some more of those contested, less than ideal placement catches. And so I think that from a fantasy standpoint, Treylon Burks is probably going to end up being a league winner for a couple of people in fantasy this year. And I think that he's going to continue to get better and better and become a bigger and bigger element of this passing game for the Titans. And I think as this connection between Tannehill and Burks grows, that ceiling for the Titans passing game only increases.
Yeah, let's move on to another loser. And of course, it's one that we really never thought we would ever see on the losing side of one of these articles here, but it has to go to the Titans' physicality.
It has to. And before I get into this, I just want to mention, by the way, gotta sell the show a little bit. If you're listening to the show, wherever you get your good podcasts on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever, there's a video version of this podcast that you can be listening to and watching over on Broadway Sports Media YouTube channel. You can go and check out the video version of this show, and you can see the gorgeous faces that accompany these dulcet tones. We've got some great video elements, including all of the audio clips that you see. We have the video form you can see on YouTube, as well as some visual elements that we work on to make the show better. Some best bet gauntlet visuals, and so we've got a video from the game later that we're going to break down we're going to break down the final penalty of the game, frankly, for you. And so you can only fully appreciate that if you're watching the video version. So go subscribe to Broadway Sports Media YouTube page and check out the video version of the show. Now, the loser of physicality is the other of the two reasons the Titans lost this game. If you had to boil it down, number one, they went 0 in the red zone. They couldn't get a touchdown when they were in the red zone 3 or 4 times. You're going to lose those games. The other thing is this Titans team was the less physical team. Now, that's not a necessary death penalty for any team in the NFL. There are some teams that build themselves in a way that they can afford to be the less physical team and still win the game. It's not a great recipe for success, but they can do it. This Titans team cannot. The Titans have, for years now, under John Robinson and Mike Vrabel, built their team around the identity of being the league's biggest bully. They've prided themselves on it. They've built their roster tailor-made specifically for it. It's who they are. They are going to be bigger than you. They're going to be stronger than you. They're going to want it more than you, and they're going to beat you up. That's the way that this team is built, and it's the ethos of this team. It's not just the way that they play. It's intertwined within the culture that Mike Vrabel has instilled in his team. So when they aren't that, when they are the less physical team in all facets of the game, like they were on Sunday, they're going to lose those games. When a team comes into town and does what you do better than you in every aspect of the game, you lose that game. You go into Arrowhead Stadium or you go into Highmark Field up in Buffalo and your team passes the ball better than the Bills or the Chiefs, you're going to win that game. If you go to San Francisco and you run the ball and play defense better than the 49ers do, you're going to win that game. If you come into Nashville and you're the more physical team, you are going to win that game. That's just the way that this team is built to play. And credit to the Bengals. They came in, and it may have been a result of the fact that they didn't have all their horses, right? They were down 2, or one key receiver coming in, ended up being down 2 by the end of the game. They were down their starting running back, even though they had a decent backup. They had some guys out that they probably would have liked to have in this game. And so they may have thought this is a necessity from a game plan standpoint. We have to come in there and we just have to be the more physical team. We have to try to out physical the big bad bully of the NFL. And credit to them, they did. Now, I think the Titans let them a little bit. It looked like, frankly, JT, this is if you are a real true homer optimist for the Titans, this is probably your take. So take it with a grain of salt. I don't think that it is the reason that they lost by any means, but there is an element of uncertainty, well, in any week for the NFL, but in particular on a holiday week, I feel like you always see a little bit of flukiness on holiday weeks in which you can tell which teams were kind of distracted during the week and needed a regular, fully focused, full time to prepare week, and which teams didn't. And frankly, this Titans team looked like they may have spent a little more time on Thanksgiving and a little less time in the game plan room. And they look like a team that might have been dealing with the PR of an offensive coordinator who's been in the news all week, frankly. Like, it looked like a team that was a little distracted. It looked like a team that didn't want it nearly as bad as we're used to seeing them want it. And so, again, not taking anything away from the Bengals executing a great game plan, but this Titans team looked they just looked off to me. I don't know, JT, did you feel the same way watching the game, or was your perspective a little different?
I think that's totally a fair take. Whether it is actually true or not,
It may not be.
You can always say that. I think you look at, of course, there were definitely other storylines going on for the Titans that the Bengals did not have to deal with. The Bengals clearly, all they wanted to do coming in is, hey, we're behind in this division that should be on top of right now, and we need to come in and get a huge win on the road here. And that's kind of what they did. As for the Titans, it might have just truly not meant that much to him. And I think you can go in, if you want to take that take a little bit farther, you can look at how the Titans didn't practice on Thanksgiving or didn't do a lot more. It was all kind of just estimated what would the injury report look like that week. And of course, it also goes kind of maybe a little bit of trying to get that secondary back. The first time all year that the Titans secondary was finally back, maybe just with most of the key players back and a lot of guys who have been there for a couple of weeks not being out there regularly. Maybe this new defense needs just a little bit of time to gel and kind of get together. But I think as far as who wanted it more, you can totally point to the Bengals. I don't know if you saw on Twitter today, I know on the field there, I mean, Pat McAfee tweeted about it as well. I don't know exactly the player. I was trying to look it up who it was, but you could tell it's 64 for the Bengals. It's a lineman or something like that. Can't exactly put my finger on what his name is. Ted Karras.
Ted Karras is a defensive line or offensive lineman.
Yes, you could see how much it meant to him. Clearly, with what he said, whether you agree or disagree with how he handled the running off the field there, clearly he wanted it, and I think that was a lot of the motto of this Bengals team. They wanted this win, and they wanted a statement win to put on their resume as they get closer and closer to getting a playoff berth.
Yeah, they did. And you mentioned the personnel the Titans had. We're going to talk about that a little bit after the news and another loser portion of this discussion. But another thing, again, this is probably more along the Homer Titans takes. So I'm saying it as an option for you as a Titans fan for consolation. However, I'm not sure I fully believe it. There's also some element to the fact that for 2 months now, the Titans have done nothing but win. And even in their one loss against the Chiefs, it was kind of a moral victory in the sense that they went into Arrowhead in prime time and with, a very hobbled team, including no Ryan Tannehill, they nearly won that game. So they went 7-1 and their one was far from a bad loss. At some point, you need a kick in the teeth. You need a splash in the face of cold water. You need a reality check. And that's what whether they needed it or not, is providing for the Titans. This is a reality check for them that they can't just coast and win games, right? They are not a team talented enough to phone it in and win these games. They're capable of winning against anybody in the league, in my opinion, but they can't do it unless they're all in. And in this game, I just think that they weren't quite all in the same calendar month the same calendar year, rather, that this Titans team recorded their monstrous 9-sack outing against Joe Burrow and company. They only managed to get home once on Sunday. I talked to Titans defensive lineman Mario Edwards after the game in the locker room. We have that clip, JT. Let's play that. But first, I want our listeners to pay attention to first what he says. We talked to him about the physicality, but we also I want you to pay attention to his demeanor right after this tough loss.
We just got to go out there and execute. It's nothing that, us as players or individuals can do. We just have to execute better. We drew things up that we did. I don't think that we executed as good as we could have. So we have to go to the drawing board again on Monday to get ready for next week.
You guys are typically the more physical team. Do you think they were the more physical team today?
I think we all were physical. I just think we got a little bit outplayed today, and we got to go to the drawing board on Monday.
Kind of changed up on third down because they weren't having success at all throughout the course of the first half, and then things kind of flipped.
I mean, it's just us, man. I guess it's just going out there and playing hard, and, too bad that we end up losing.
I'm sorry if you've already been asked this, but it's been a long time. A number of weeks since somebody went for 100 yards against you, even as a team today.
Right.
This is what happened.
Just we got outplayed today. It's as simple as put. We got to go back to the drawing board on Monday, and we got to get ready to play for next Sunday.
I know you weren't here last year, but one of the big callings for this team was to help create more turnovers because they got Burrow 9 times last year and didn't get him to turn over. No turnovers today. A big part of this, wasn't it?
We always want to get a turnover. You get one, you're in it. You get two, you win it. So we didn't get any turnovers today, and I think, that's probably why I think we lost a little bit today.
So the defense definitely got pushed around up front as well as in the secondary, and the demeanor from him was kind of the demeanor. I wanted you to pay attention to that because it was an example of really what the demeanor from all the players in the locker room was. They were disappointed, but they weren't really crushed, and there certainly was no panic on their faces or in their answers. And I think that's the reasonable way to approach this, whether you're on the team or you're a fan of the team. This is not a panic loss. It wasn't a horrible loss by any means. The Bengals are a good team, and it was a close game all the way down to the wire. It was just a disappointing loss, and they have some things to work on. It was kind of a reality check, but they were not the more physical team, and it showed itself in the lack of physicality showed in the second half for this defense in particular. It was not the best performance all year by this Titans defense. In fact, it was one of the worst that we've seen from them all year in the run game in particular, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a couple minutes. But to be fair to the defense, before I go in on them a little bit, this was not entirely on them. In full 2022 Broncos fashion, you've heard the statistics thrown around for weeks now that the Broncos only scored 17 or 18 points each week, then they'd be 7-2 or whatever. I went and checked to see what the minimum number of points the Titans offense would need to score each week in order to have a really nice record, or a better record than 7-4 would be. And if the Titans offense managed at least 23 points in every game this year, they'd be 10-1. So this defense has done their job. They've not let a team score over 20 in almost 2 months. This is a defense that, even in a game like Sunday, in which they did not play their best by any stretch of the imagination, they're doing their job. They're keeping teams to 20 points or less. When you're keeping teams to 20 points or less on offense, you should be winning a lot of games. And to the Titans' credit, they are, but that's a game in which they totally could have won. It's not like the Bengals ran it up on them. In the secondary, you really saw in the fourth quarter, JT, and you could kind of tell that the direction of the game was going in a negative way for the Titans. It was probably going to me, it felt like, even though there was plenty of time left, after these two plays by the Bengals in the fourth quarter, identical plays, both go routes, T. Higgins up the right-hand side of the field on the side nearest to you. So you got an up-close view of this. The Titans secondary was just out-physicaled. Like they just were not as good as the Bengals receivers. And T. Higgins is a great receiver, of course, but he just clowns you. He totally punks you on back-to-back drives for massive gains on the same route in the same place against both of the Titans' top two cornerbacks, Christian Fulton and Roger McCreary. He goes up the sideline and gets these massive chunk plays, both of which put the Bengals in the high red zone, and both of which ultimately ended the game for the Bengals. He was the Bengals' only remaining great receiver in the game at that point, T. Higgins was. And Titans, both standout cornerbacks, got a taste of him on that route. First, it was Roger McCreary getting absolutely punked in the front corner of the end zone, where T. Higgins committed OPI like he should and got the touchdown. And listen, I have been the leader of the hashtag always commit OPI on Twitter for months now. I say it all the time. Many in the media say it all the time. They don't call it. Receivers will, or at least should, always commit OPI, and that's just the way that the league works right now. They're not going to call it. So defenders have to be physical enough to be able to contend with that hand fighting and that pushing off. And T. Higgins pushed off Roger McCreary, made him look a little small there, and got the touchdown. And Roger McCreary has to play better than that. It was the same way with Christian Fulton. It was a more contested catch, but ultimately T. Higgins was the more physical player on that route, and he got the ball pulled in and got a massive chunk play and got the team down there in a position to end the game, essentially. Neither of Christian Fulton or Roger McCreary put up a great fight on those routes, and both lost the battle to a receiver who was just more physical than them. So Cincinnati absolutely deserves their flowers from this performance and for their game plan. They came into the den of the biggest, baddest bully squad in the NFL, and they outplayed them at their own game.
One more winner on the Titans side here before we get into some news and some stats real quick. Let's talk about something that is kind of trending in the right direction for the Titans, something that you can take out of this loss still. It's targeting the good players on offense for these Titans.
I know, and this is a genuine win, although the bar seems kind of low. It was the first week that I got this final packet of all the data in the press room and looked at the receiving section of the Titans box score, and things felt like they were in the correct order for the most part. Treylon Burks, Chigakonkwo, Austin Hooper, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Robert Woods, all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those guys saw 4 or more targets in this game. They accounted for 16 of the team's 22 receptions. Now, to any outsider, this likely sounds like a pretty strange thing to praise. What they wouldn't know is that this team just loves to target guys who, frankly, shouldn't really be seeing the field much at all in the first place. The pecking order of Okonkwo, then Hooper, large gap, and then Jeff Swaim in the receiving game finally came to fruition. It only took 3 months. Holy cow. And then the depth receivers, such as Cody Hollister, weren't taking away looks that should have been going to the Treylon Burkses and the Robert Woods of the team. It's a very low bar for the Titans, and they need to keep these priorities straight moving forward, but it's something worth praising. I got some pushback from our friend of the show, Kenneth, on Twitter, who, you know, I wouldn't call him out if I didn't like him. So Kenneth, this isn't a shot at you, but he said that this was an L take by me, and that he made it his personal vendetta yesterday. It was his campaign of the day, his crusade of the day against the idea that Nick Westbrook-Akine and Treylon Burks should under no circumstances be getting the same number of targets. They both got 6 in a game. That this is a failure of the coaching staff and of Todd Downing and of Ryan Tannehill for not targeting Treylon Burks more than they do. Now, I can appreciate the sentiment, Kenneth, and others who feel this way. However, I would love for you to point out wherever in this episode or in my article I said that Nick Westbrook-Akine should be getting the same amount of attention and run and snaps and targets as Treylon Burks. That's not my point at all. You're missing my point entirely. So you're kind of straw manning me here a little bit. My point is simply that Nick Westbrook-Akine does fall into the category for this Titans team, especially of late, in which he's really had kind of a breakout. He's become one of their best weapons, and he's proven himself in the past month or so. He falls into the category of good players on this team. He does. Now, is he as good as Treylon Burks? No, of course not, Kenneth. Of course not. And so he shouldn't be getting the wide receiver 1 looks. It should be Treylon Burks. However, Burks is in his second game back. He's still very much blossoming as an NFL receiver. And we know this Titans coaching staff loves to really gently ease their rookie wide receivers into the scheme. So he'll get there. I don't think anybody can reasonably be worried about the fact that Treylon Burks continues to trend in the right direction in terms of target share, and it's just going to get better and better for him, and he'll get there. He will be getting the lion's share of targets sooner than later. So that point is moot, in my opinion. This Titans team needs to throw to the good players, and by that I mean they need to not be throwing to the Jeff Swaims and the Cody Hollisters of the world, and for the most part, they did not in this game, and so that's a win. Now, I almost was ready for the next winner or loser. We are going to take a break real quick. We got 4 more for you that we'll go through faster than we did the first 3 in the back half of the show. But first, we've got some news from producer JT. But first, I got to tell you real quick, if you are looking for advertising opportunities in the Middle Tennessee or anywhere area for that matter, and you are a business owner, we would love to chat with you, whether it's via our emails on BroadwaySportsMedia.com. You can reach out to us there, or you can reach out to me or anybody else on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook or Instagram or wherever. Reach out to us. We would love to just have a chat with you about some potential advertising opportunities. We've got thousands of listeners each and every episode and week on our broadcasting platforms of choice on podcasts and live streams. We've got tens of thousands of clicks on social media and on our website. You can get advertising on the site, whether you would like, sponsored articles or banners on the site. We've also got opportunities for you to advertise on our social media platforms where we get hundreds of thousands of impressions. So we've got plenty of eyeballs for you. We would love for a couple small businesses to come in and, help support a local small business like ourselves. And we would love to give that love back to you and help promote your product, because we love to promote local business. That's what we're about here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. So if you're an advertiser, or you are looking, or maybe you work for a company that you think would be a good fit, please reach out to us. All right, now let's get to the Titans news with producer JT.
Let's start this news segment here. First, talking about how good me and Easton on this Hot Read podcast have been in the past couple weeks when it's come to the betting. Not to boast, but I mean,
no, to boast. Let's boast.
Okay, let's boast. If you've been listening to the show, you have been making money. And of course, let's talk about our best bet gauntlet here this week. What did we go? We went 5-5 this week. So maybe that's not our best, but in the past weeks, we've been 500 or better in the past couple of weeks, and we're still making
Over the last month as a show on the gauntlet, we have been making money, and that's evidenced by our records. JT, can you give us our overall record for the season?
Yeah, so of course I won this week just by a little bit, and you can go back and forth this week and see that there's been a couple games this week that maybe we should have won. We lose because of a hook or whatnot. It was a kind of a
what
weird
did I
week.
say when we drafted on Friday about that Packers game? I took the Packers,
you needed the hook, but you didn't get it.
I was banking on getting the 7, and I never got it. So it's just how it's betting 101. I'll learn.
But let's talk about our overall records here. Of course, I am finally getting off the 500 train, going 3-2 this week, bringing my record to 28, 27, and 5. Easton, of course, just falling right below 500, going 2-3 on the week, brings his record to 32, 25, and 3. So any ground that I can make right now is ground that I need to make up. So that's good for me. And let's just go back a week from now,
please,
and talk about our Thanksgiving little betting special and how we did, because I don't think we ever talked about that. So
we did amazing.
I'm going to pull up the sheet here for you to talk about our best bets of Thanksgiving. And Easton, if you
look at all that green.
Look at all the green.
Went 11-7 on the day. On Thanksgiving, we did, of course, our Thanksgiving betting special last Wednesday. And so if you listen to that and you bet along with the show, we went 11-7. Our props went almost perfect. I think we missed out on like 2 props all day. We went 2 of 3 on our parlays. Would have gone 3-3 if the Bills didn't screw around with the Lions. And we just did a really great job. I know I made a lot of money. I know JT made a lot of money. And if you bet along with the show, which you should have, you made a lot of money on Thanksgiving. So we are on a absolute tear, a real hot streak for the Hot Read podcast, and we're going to keep it going. So if you want to ride along, hitch your wagon to what is a hot one right now in the show, we encourage you to do so and tell your friends. We're making money on the Hot Read. You should listen and follow our betting.
Yeah, and if you listened to that special episode last week, you knew I was flirting with saying that if I could call my lock of the week a lock. And I'm glad I didn't, because the only prop that I really came close to winning that I didn't is the Jared Goff under 36.5 pass attempts. And of course, Jared Goff.
How many did he throw?
37 pass attempts. So bad brutal. Beat for me on the week. So let's talk about a couple of Titans stats for this game yesterday on Sunday. And the Titans scored only 6 points in the second half against the Bengals. And let's just talk about their splits, being the Titans and their opponents in 11 games this season. So in the first quarter, the Titans, who so far have been starting out really hot on the season in the first quarter, have scored 52 points to their opponents' 22. In the second quarter, it gets even better, with the Titans scoring 95 points to their opponent's 63. But then things take a massive dip in the second half. In the third quarter, the Titans are scoring 40 points to their opponent's 75. In the fourth quarter, the Titans are scoring 22 points to their opponent's 42 total on the season.
Yeah. So this year, it's been the story of the season for them, right? This Titans team is frankly really bad at in-game adjustments, and it's evidenced by the fact that their offense is great and their defense is great in the first 2 quarters. They outscore teams. I mean, they're more than doubling teams scoring in the first quarter. They almost have 100 points on the year in the second quarter alone. And then in the third and fourth quarter, they get outscored thoroughly, almost doubled in both quarters by opposing teams. It's the same if you take out their losses as well. I had somebody at Rand from Brantwood, said in my tweet with these statistics, I said that the Titans continue to fail to adjust mid-game and their opponents don't. And Rand mentioned, well, 7 opponents didn't because they have 7 wins, which a fair take on the surface, but that's incorrect. If you just take their 7 wins, take out the losses, take out the Bills blowing them out on Monday night, because that's maybe that was a fringe outlier game that was skewing the statistics. They are still killing teams in the first 2 quarters and getting killed in the third and fourth quarter. They're outscoring teams in the first quarter in their wins 38-12 and then 65-37 in the second. And in the third, they're getting outscored in wins, mind you, 27-35. And then they've tied currently 19-19 in the fourth quarter. Not enough. Of course, enough to win these games, obviously, because they win. They have more points than their opponents do in these wins. That's how that works. But they are doing it by getting a lead in the first half and holding on. And it's not been nearly the storyline that it was early in the year when that was very evident, because they've gotten a little bit better in the second half. But it's kind of sneaky, still a massive problem for them, and they've got to get that fixed if they want to be a contender.
Moving on, let's talk about another stat for the Titans, which, not to bring more bad news onto this loss this week, but this season, they're only 1-4 against teams currently above 500. And that one win is coming against the Carson Wentz-led Commanders.
That's right.
So it's a little concerning in that area of the Titans team. Of course, they're going to comfortably kind of get into these playoffs with a home game, but if they come up with against the team, they're gonna have to show out.
Yeah, I mean, the problem here, and you got to have nuance to understand this. This is not a reason for massive concern for the Titans, but it is a concern. Here's the deal. This is a little bit misleading as a statistic, because when you take those 5 games against winning teams this year, they do have a win against the Commanders. They have 2 losses against they have actually 3 losses against winning teams that came at the buzzer, against the Giants in a game that they should have won if Randy Bullock knew how to kick, against the Chiefs, in which that was a game they shouldn't have even been in because they were beaten up on the road in prime time in one of the hardest places to play with a backup rookie quarterback, and they still almost won that game. And then in this game against Cincinnati, it was a coin flip game all the way down to the end. And so they've been in these games. They've just not had the close game, 1-score game luck that they typically have. They did get blown out once by the Bills, which we kind of all chalk up to just a disaster game early in the season that isn't super reflective of this team. So 1-4 isn't as bad as it sounds. However, they do, unfortunately, once they get into the playoffs, only have other good teams to choose from. And that's how that works. You get to the playoffs, it's only good teams left. You got to have a plan then. And right now, they're not beating the good teams. They've got some good teams coming up down the stretch. They've got the Cowboys and they've got the Eagles. They've got some teams that they can still kind of cut their teeth against better opponents and see if they can get some wins. So that'll really be, I think, the most telling element of their remaining schedule. But they've got to get wins against. I mean, I'm floundering here because I don't know what else to say besides they've got to get wins against better teams.
Yeah, and they'll have an opportunity with a team that's kind of been red hot recently in their game, especially yesterday. It'll be interesting to see if it continues. And the Titans kind of get a little unlucky to catch the Jacksonville Jaguars twice at the end of the season here, where if you watched that game yesterday, without Travis Etienne, I mean, even without having him, they put it to the Baltimore Ravens and got a very convincing win at the end of that game at the buzzer. They're going to have to come up against this team twice now, who looks like they're slowly but surely putting it all together.
They did, JT. They did look good, and we said this at the beginning of the season that I felt like the Jaguars could pose a real problem for the Titans because they catch them both times at the end of the season. I tweeted out yesterday that it's broke the Titans are very lucky to have 2 years in a row caught the Colts both times before Halloween, when they had a new quarterback both years and had a new offense trying to figure things out. That was advantageous and lucky on their part. The woke take is the Titans got really unlucky having to catch this young, talented Jaguars team at the end of this season once they've started to really put this thing together. And if yesterday was any indicator, they're headed in the right direction and are going to prove a challenge for the Titans in their 2 games coming up.
And that's all we have for the news today. Let's get back to some more winners and losers.
Let's do it. So before you give me the next loser, JT, I gotta say real quick, if you are not already a Broadway Insider, you need to go and do that. Becoming a Broadway Insider means that you can check out the entire Mike Herndon show in its entirety on YouTube in its video format. You can only get that full show if you're a Broadway Insider. I'm the producer of that show. I can tell you firsthand that it's fantastic. You become a Broadway Insider today. It just costs you 99 cents for your first month when you go sign up with code INSIDER. It is super, super cheap, and you get the Mike Herndon show. You get access to special fantasy leagues. You get behind-the-scenes looks at certain elements of the team in our written articles, premium articles. You can only get if you're an insider, early access articles that you get early if you're an insider. So all of these things can be yours for just the price of 1 cup of coffee each month. It's super affordable. It helps us keep the lights on, and it's totally worth your money. All right, JT, what's our next loser?
Yeah, let's jump into a loser on this game. And of course, we've talked about it, and everybody could kind of see where this one was going. It's the Titans ground game.
Yeah, here's the second of the second part of the physicality discussion, in my opinion, and it's one of the 2 primary reasons the Titans lost this game. The team most famous in the league right now for their ability on the ground on both sides of the ball got punked in both departments by the Bengals. Hard to win when you let that happen. And the Titans, they've built their reputation under Mike Vrabel on being dominant in the run game on both offense and defense. It's the straw that stirs their drink. Without a capable run game on offense, the passing game can no longer play second fiddle, really, and often turns back into a pumpkin a little bit. Now, they didn't in this game, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a second, but without the capable run defense, which they certainly didn't have in this game, was kind of bizarre in that way. Their secondary is forced to devote bodies to the run-stopping effort, and the lack of complementary football leaves their aerial defenses significantly weakened. Really, they don't have the horses in the secondary to play man all day, every day. So, like, have you ever wondered why the Titans have a league-high red zone efficiency offense season after season? It's because of their run-based offense paired with an effective passing game that's always made them so lethal in the red zone. That was far from the case against the Bengals, who held the Titans to their worst rushing performance all season. JT, Derrick Henry was made to look kind of washed in this game, which, as we've established on the show, he's not, but he was made to look that way by the run blocking effort of the Titans. And on the offensive line, Henry managed a putrid 2.2 yards per carry on 17 carries for just 38 yards. Needless to say, Ben Jones is needed back from concussion protocol very badly. The good news for the Titans is I'm almost certain he'll be back this week based on how he was almost back next week. 1 more week should be enough to get him back, and the Titans run game, I think, can only get better from here because this is the low point for them in years. On defense, Cincinnati became the first team in 9 weeks, over 2 months, JT, to hang 100 or more yards rushing on the Titans. It was reminiscent at times of the Titans home opener when backup running back Samaje Perine was seemingly getting 4 to 5 yards per carry. At one point I looked down, he was getting 5.5 yards per carry whenever he wanted it. Who were these Titans that we saw? They looked more sluggish and dull than they usually do. Their run fits were regularly poor in this game. In talking to the players after the game, that was something that they constantly mentioned. It's something that Kevin Byard mentioned in his interview today on Monday about how number 1 priority for the Titans defense is to get their run defense figured out, get it cleaned up, and get those run fits in check. So they'd gotten back, JT, some guys that you felt like they could do enough despite who they were missing to really be a net positive, in my opinion. No Danico Autry on the defense was a big loss, and it's the first time all year they've not had him to start a game, but they were getting back Elijah Molden and Bud Dupree and Amani Hooker all together on the field for the first time all season long. And this was the result. They looked rusty, and the defense looked like they really missed one of their best defenders in Autry. Did they miss Autry as badly as it looked? Was there an element of rust for the newcomers? Like, what I need to go back and watch the film to know exactly what went wrong there. But this performance ultimately left us with far more questions than answers.
Let's move on to another winner here, and it's one that continues to get on these winner and losers articles here, and it's a good sign for the Titans. It's Ryan Tannehill in the passing game.
Yeah, and based on Twitter's reaction to this game, this may not be the most popular thing to say, but it does happen to be true, I think. Ryan Tannehill in the passing game had their second straight impressive outing. After a rough start in which Tannehill had a couple of passes batted down at the line that were too low and then a couple sail on him that were too high, Goldilocks really dialed it in from there. I thought that he figured it out, and after he got it under control, after the first couple drives really went nowhere for either team, he looked good, and the Titans passing game looked good to me. When you're pointing to reasons why the Titans lost this game, the passing game is very, very low on the list of reasons. I felt like the passing game was really, and JT, I wonder if you agree, was really the only element of this Titans not defense or offense, any element of their game that was a true positive for this game. Did you feel the same way? That felt like the only plus for them on any side of the ball.
I think so, especially considering how the Bengals secondary has been getting healthier and healthier.
Right.
I think currently they're really only missing A.J. Awuzie, who is really a big integral part of that team. But still, I mean, for how good this Bengals secondary has been, especially including which they were able to do yesterday in stopping the run, getting some of those cornerbacks getting in on the blitzes to stop that run game.
Yeah.
Besides that, they've been very good through the air at stopping a lot of the passing game. And it was really a good sign for them, especially. I was very impressed with MWI against a couple of those corners when he was playing yesterday. Yeah. And then, of course, Treylon Burks doing Treylon Burks things. You know, I was sitting there in that one play where he went for that 51-yard bomb. I saw Tannehill do the play action. I saw NWI kind of do his route, and I was like, oh, this play's over. He's just going to have to throw it away. And then he throws it up, and I was like, there's no way. There's no way. And then he comes down with it, and I was like, That's what we've been waiting for. I guess if you're a Titans fan, that's what you've been waiting for this entire season. I think it only continues to get better.
Yeah, Tannehill had a stat line of 22 completions on 34 attempts for 291 yards. It's a season high for him in all three categories outside of last Thursday night. The past two games have been the most passing yards the Titans have had in any game this year. And the Titans looked to have a proficient passing game once again. That was something that people, ourselves included, JT, were talking about all week on the heels of that primetime performance in Green Bay. Was that a fluke? Did the Titans figure out how to pass the ball, or does Green Bay's defense just really stink? Now, I think both actually are true based on last night against the Eagles. Green Bay's defense is aggressively bad, but also the Titans have figured out how to pass the ball. Now, the elements of this Titans team that have changed are the available receivers, and we'll talk about that in a second, and the pass blocking effort on the offensive line. Now, while the run blocking has gone completely in the tank, I don't know why this offensive line has forgotten how to run block. They have, in the past couple weeks, really figured out a not great pass protection scheme, but a passable one. And that's allowed Ryan Tannehill the time to find his guys downfield. And he's got guys downfield that are getting open. Really, he was only sacked once by the Bengals and was generally given enough time to find those receivers. And he's got a couple weeks of continuity with those guys now, those available weapons. They're getting the desired results, I think. And that's the thing that sticks out to me most. For 2 years now with this Titans team, we've been looking at them and saying, geez, man, on any given week, we don't know if they're going to have a group of more than one or two guys out there in the passing game that can be viable weapons downfield and can make a play. We've not known that. It's been a total crapshoot. In some weeks, the list of those guys has been zero. It's been none. I mean, I think back to last year, some of the weeks that NWI was wide receiver one, and you had Cody Hollister getting like 7 targets. It was a disaster. The past couple weeks, the past month or so, has felt like the first time in 2 years that the Titans have had a stable of guys a stable of guys who are consistently there week after week in Treylon Burks, Robert Woods, Chigakonkwo, Austin Hooper, now Derrick Henry in the passing game, Dontrell Hilliard, who's proven to be one of the sneaky best receiving backs in the league. Like, they've got no guys that are true A-plus elite NFL players yet. Treylon Burks looks like he's trending that way, but right now he's still, a B-plus player. They've got a handful of C-plus to B-minus B players that 6, 7, or 8 guys on the field at any given time can be trusted to go out there and make a play in the passing game. And the Titans have lacked that for 2 years. And if they can continue to develop this passing game and remember how to run the ball, which they've forgotten how to do in the coming weeks, hopefully adding talented rookie receiver Kyle Phillips back to the mix as well, by the way, they could be an actual passing threat come the playoffs. And it seems like Titans fans have forgotten that's really what they've been asking for, right? This Titans team looks like they're finally figuring out how to be a viable passing game team at the right time with the playoffs looming large. That's going to be a plus for them in the postseason.
Alrighty, let's get to our final loser of this winners and losers episode today. And it's, of course, the one that is the most talked about from this game. It's the special teams.
Yeah, Craig Augerman's unit did not pull their weight in this one either. Tennessee's special teams cost them 3 points when rookie kicker Caleb Shudak had a rough start to his career, could not convert from just 35 yards right before half. It was only his second kick of his career, but that should not have been a problem for him. Of course, what made the moment so much worse than it otherwise could have been for the young player is that the Titans had gotten there on a 58-yard 2-minute drill with the opportunity to double dip before getting the ball back at half. It was a great drive from the offense, some life that was just crushed. All the momentum was crushed when he could not get the 3 up on the board and take the 13-10 lead at half. I didn't think I'd be saying this, JT, but the Titans, they really missed Randy Bullock yesterday, and special teams also cost them a chance at the end of the game to tie things up. Now, would they have? Unlikely. They had about 1:50 to play with and no timeouts, and they couldn't just march down and get 3. They needed 7 to tie and then have a chance in overtime. So the odds were slim, but that's still a lot of time on the clock for any NFL team. You would have liked to have seen the Titans get a chance there at the end, and they didn't because of a special teams blunder that cost them a chance to tie things up at the end of the game. Very costly, very foolish penalty. We have that play, JT, if you wouldn't mind playing the clip from the actual game for us. And you'll see here, I wasn't sure in the moment what had happened. And it wasn't until I got back and saw these guys saw the play of these guys at the end of the game. You look here, and in a second, if you'll play it, JT, it'll get to the second view. If we move further down in the video, let it play through this view. And then we get to, it keys in on the 2 interior linemen of the Titans, Tier Tart, Kevin Strong. They both kind of crack down on the snapper, who's a protected defenseless player. You can't make forcible contact to the head or neck area, and that was ultimately the call here. Now, the Bengals long snapper, I guess to his credit, sold it really hard. It was kind of soft in that way, but ultimately they can't be in that vicinity. They have to know better, and their coach said as much in his press conference today on Monday. He said after seeing the video that both of those guys should know, we're going to coach it up, that like, if you do that, it's always going to get called. It was called on Kevin Strong, which is tough for him, but it could have really been called on either Strong or Tart there. It's a foolish penalty. And ultimately, listen, the inability for the Titans offense to conduct a 2-minute drill at the end of the game was far from the reason the Titans lost the game. So that's the grain of salt there. They didn't cost the Titans this game. But as we talked about earlier, convert on any other of their 4 red zone trips, and Cincinnati is kicking this field goal to tie the game, not to take a 7-point lead. Now, that doesn't mean it was a wise decision to risk getting called for this penalty and ending the game. It was not. It was a stupid decision that both of these guys are going to have to learn from. But in a game repeatedly dictated by the Bengals' lack of discipline on the penalty front, it was a Titans special teams lack of discipline that cost them a chance in the end and ultimately sealed their fate. And that's going to do it for today's episode. It was a tough one for the Titans. They've got a big game in Philly. I can't wait for us to dive into that one on Friday. If you are still hanging around, which I hope that you are before you go, please rate, review, and subscribe. If you are not subscribed to the show and you're just listening to individual episodes, you're weird. Don't do that. Subscribe, whether you're listening on podcast or on video on YouTube. Subscribe to Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. Subscribe to the Hot Read Podcast. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, which we have the analytics, folks, we know that most of you are, you got to be leaving a rating and review. We've not gotten a review written to us since November 15th. That's far too long. We want to hear from somebody, anybody.
Take out your frustration on me this week.
Exactly.
Yeah,
call JT a moron and go full homer on him. You can say whatever you want. We will read it on the show. Whatever it is, we'll read it on the show. I promise. So leave a rating, and a 5-star rating and a review takes 10 seconds. It means a lot to us and the ability to sell the show. And we want to interact with y'all. If you leave your Twitter handle, we will follow you on Twitter. And that's going to do it for today's show. So go do that right now. Rate, review, subscribe so that you get notification and a download on Friday when we talk Bengals, or excuse me, when we talk Eagles. We're going to have James Foster back for James Foster Friday. We're going to be hopefully every Friday for the rest of the season. So excited to talk to him. Looking ahead to a very big game against a very tough opponent in the Eagles. The Titans play next Sunday. Until then, until Friday, I am Easton Freeze for producer JT. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you then.